Welcome to the evening review. My name is Ukwana Klache, and we are joined in studio by Namfisa CEO Kenneth Matomola. Before we go into that interview, please have a look at the front page. Welcome to the evening review. How are you, Mr. Matomola?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You were recently reappointed as Namfisa CEO. Would you just care to reflect on the previous term and the changes that the financial non-banking sector has been through?
Thank you for the question. The past 5 years has been a very productive year, especially in the banking sector, where we were busy with the reform in the non-banking sector. The reform was in 3 areas. Firstly, we needed to relook at the legislative instruments because most of the laws that we administer are quite archaic, very old, came into place way back in the 1950s. And therefore, those laws needed to be aligned to what is happening in the financial sector during this time. And the second reform was to do with the way we do supervision. Supervision, we were doing it in such a way that it was more compliance-based, where we tick boxes. But the world has moved on and has moved to risk-based supervision because we do not have all the resources that is required. Therefore, we need to focus our resources to the areas where it matters most, where there's risks and there's impact if we look at those areas. That was the second reform. The third reform was looking internally in Namfisa to look at the organization itself, whether it is structured properly to be able to carry out Namfisa's mandate in terms of the new legislative instruments. So we needed to configure institution, look at our processes, how these processes can support the new legislative instrument, how they can support the new supervisory approach, which is the risk-based approach. And that's the process that we have gone through. And through that process, on the legislative reform, we have finalized the Financial Institution and Markets. So it is an act. It has been signed by the president. In 2018, we finalized the Micro Lending Act, which is in force now and is being implemented. We have finalized the new Namfisa Act, which has given us some different powers that are in line with the international standards. And that has also been signed by the president. They just need to be gazetted. Once the Namfisa Act and the FEAM are gazetted, then we move on into the new process where we would want to implement these laws. And the structure has been relooked at, has been tested for over 2 years now, and we are busy retweaking it. Our processes we have gone through business reengineering to enhance operational efficiencies. And this is what we have been busy with for the last 5 years, and it's bearing fruits.
In a nutshell, how would you say this improves the oversight function of Namfisa as a regulator as soon as the film bill and the new Namfisa, I beg your pardon, my apologies, as soon as the Film Act and the Namfisa Act now are gazetted, how would this improve Namfisa's oversight?
I think you will understand that at the time when the Namfisa Act was put into place, way back in 2001, the situation in the financial sector has tremendously changed. And therefore, the new Act, Namfisa Act, embraces the new principles and new practices that enhances supervision, that enhances regulation. And similarly to the FIM Act, which deals with the entire non-banking sector, excluding the provision of credit. It's also premised on principle-based, and whereby it also caters for that if there are any changes in the sector, those changes can be catered for through the issuance of subordinate legislation that can be issued by the minister, or that can be issued by the authority itself, which is Namfisa, so that we can cater for all new issues that crops up in the financial sector. And the best thing is this is principle based, and it also allows us to implement risk supervision, because the old act was allowing us to ensure that we do compliance based, which is requires more resources. However, the new act, firstly, it enhances the powers in such a way that we are able to issue administrative fines. The old act were somehow only allows in most cases that we go through the courts of law in order to enforce certain actions. But now there's a process where there are some administrative fines. There are processes where we are required to go through the court process, which is more time consuming, and it's not so responsive to issues that requires to be corrected quickly. And also the new act also looks at more on consumer protection, where it's quite clear that it's our mandate for consumer protection as well as the consumer awareness and uh, education of consumers. The old act is quite a bit silent on that, but the new act is quite explicit on the areas of consumer protection and consumer awareness, and as I have said, issues related to risk-based supervision. So it requires transparency from our end, even when we have our financial positions. We need to explain to our stakeholders how we have utilized the funds that we collect from the public. So it's quite a transparent process. So it enhances transparency, it enhances uh, 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 consumer protection, and it also enhances confidence in the financial sector and stability. So the new act is, I'm quite excited about it.
What has Namfisa done as a regulator to bring industry on par now that the Act is here? And how are you going to ensure that your stakeholders in the financial non-banking sector are kept abreast and would know what is required of them?
When we embarked on this reform, what we have done is that we came up with the plan. And the plan was for us to prepare ourselves as well as the industry for the reforms. And before even the act became promulgated, we have been consulting with the industry, firstly on the provisions in the act, and secondly, uh, there are subordinate legislation that need to be issued to support these acts. And we have been consulting the industry informally on these subordinate legislation. And now when the act will be put in place, will be gazetted, then we move on to the formal consultation that we will be able to issue these standards. We gazette them. We say, here are the standards. Please provide us with your formal views on the standards. And those views will be considered. And once they have been considered, it's when those subordinate legislation will come into force. So in that process, the industry is involved throughout the consultation process. And we continuously communicate. And what we intend to do also, at some time, we will invite the industry for the launch of the theme and the new acts that we have, so that the industry is aware of where we are going to. We have also communicated with the industry in terms of our plan that we intend to do. And we are preparing the industry for, as soon as the acts are gazetted, then we'll take about 9 to 12 to prepare the industry for implementation. So that is how we intend to deal with the awareness. We want to deal with the issue of that the industry is also ready for the implementation. Although this process has started long back, before the acts were promulgated in Parliament, were passed in Parliament. But now we need to intensify those awareness programs to the consumers as well as the industry at large.
There are concerns that now with this new act that the cost of compliance has gone up. What do you say to counter these claims that the Firm Act will make the cost of doing business for stakeholders in the financial non-banking sector more expensive, and that ultimately this cost is passed on to the consumer?
That is a very important question that we need to understand fully. In my view, the compliance-based regulations are mostly because they requires you to do things that are insignificant. But we are moving on or embarking on risk-based supervision because we are mindful of the resources that we have. We do have limited resources, and we need to balance the cost of regulation vision and with the benefit of having supervision and regulation. And therefore, we, in my view, is that the cost of regulation will not be that significant, unlike the cost of non-regulation. If something hits the sector where the regulation are sketchy, where the regulation is inadequate, then the economy will need to bear the blunt of that significant cost. So far, at the regulator, we are mindful of the cost, and therefore we want to maximize the resources that we have. And there are control mechanisms that are in place. And those controls that are in place, if one from the authority side, what we have done in the past years is that we have looked at how do we compare ourselves in terms of our costs with our sister regulators in country and outside the country to see how optimal we are utilizing our resources. And we are comparing very, very, very well with in country and outside the borders of Namibia. And that is the process that we'll be doing. And the second process is that whenever we do our budgeting and our strategy, once that is finalized, it's sent to the Minister of Finance, who scrutinizes it and looks at it and provides his guidance and approval So those are all the checks and balances that are in there to ensure that the cost of regulation is kept at a minimum, and that the public need not to worry that the cost of regulation will definitely exceed the benefit. That is what we look at all the time. So that worry is, and in my view, it's not founded on good reasoning. And you will see as we continue to look at how we implement our cost structure will relatively remain the same. It might not, it will just go up in terms of inflationary pressures that might exist at that end. And that's where we find ourselves. So we are mindful about that. So maybe the cost of compliance that people are speaking about is that there are entities that operate in the banking, non-banking sector that are outside our regulatory net, those which will be brought into the regulatory net. And therefore, they feel that now, since they'll be part and parcel of the regulated net, that might increase their cost of providing service. But in our view, we think it's a good thing to have them into the net so that they are all regulated.
And then there's another issue I want to talk about, and this speaks to a policy issue where we've seen that there has been a push to repatriate some capital from South Africa and invest it in instruments locally. Do you, as regulator, believe that this is bearing the fruits in terms of growing the economy? And at the same time, do you believe that investors are getting the necessary returns to ensure their long-term sustainabilities?
I believe so. The government policy is a noble one. And just to give you a scenario, what will benefit us as the society, that the capital institutional savings that get from Namibia and it's shipped elsewhere and it's utilized to develop other countries where that it's employed. For example, I retire from here, I leave the city, probably to my village where I come from, and at the village where I come from, maybe there might not be no good infrastructure like roads, schools, hospitals, and so forth. So those days, but I retire with some good returns, good retirement package, but I'm unable to access those services. So when you look at that when this money is repatriated, it is employed in the real economy, that infrastructure is built and it is utilized for that purpose. In it one, there is economic growth and development that will take place within the country, which is a noble idea. Here and there might be investments that might go sour. However, the majority of the investment from the data that we have are bearing fruits, and they are creating. We collect on a yearly basis data from the entities, and this data suggests that indeed employment has been created by repatriating these funds from the countries where they have been employed to employ them in Namibia. So it's a matter of looking at, as Namibians, that we utilize the available savings for the productive assets that are available in Namibia. So we need to create that. And also, what this brings out, it brings out that we create skills in country other than creating skills outside the country. Money is being shipped to. So the holistic picture, if you look at the bigger picture of the government policy, then you see that it's a noble idea. We just need to implement it appropriately.
Thank you for that. Any closing thoughts before we end the interview, Mr. Matomola?
I would want to say that let's embrace the changes that is taking place in the non-banking sector, because this is for the benefit of the citizenry of Namibia. Because we want to have our financial sector to be competitive, like the sectors within other countries. And we know that if we are not competitive, then we'll be left behind. Therefore, these changes that are taking place are changes to the benefit of our country, and therefore it will be for the benefit of everyone that lives in Namibia. And I'm very excited that these new laws will soon come into place, and the spin-off from the benefit will be a tremendous spin-off. That's what I need to encourage, and also to encourage the people outside there, if they need any more information from the authority in terms of consumer complaints and handling and so forth, and dealing with other entities, please, they are welcome to visit our offices so that we can provide them with information. So we are accessible with all different platforms on our website, or you can then visit our offices. They can call us so that we are able to assist the entire country, because we cannot be everywhere in this beautiful Republic of Namibia, but there are platforms where they can reach us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Evening Review. Good night.